Hi, I'm Sarah Schrader, and I'm one of the critter caretakers here on Concordia's campus. I am coming to you from ISC 232, which is our critter headquarters in the Science Center. And if you hear a bird in the background, that's Jules, our cockatiel. She's being kind of loud and sassy right now, so she might squawk, and I'm really sorry if she gets really loud. As many of you may know, especially if you're watching this video series, here at Concordia, we have a diverse family of critters ranging from a sweet bird named Jules to a variety of reptiles, spiders, and a saltwater tank. Of all of these critters, some of them are herbivorous and only eat seeds and produce in their diet, but a large amount of them are carnivorous and require a live food source. For example, our tree frogs, we have gray tree frogs and red-eyed tree frogs, our fire-bellied toads, our variety of geckos and spiders, and we have a lot of other reptiles that eat meat. There are quite a few options for live food sources for exotic pets that provide a range of nutritional value. Some of these different options include a variety of worms like earthworms or mealworms and waxworms. And then for smaller critters, we might pick something like flightless fruit flies. And then there's also crickets and dubia cockroaches. So just like with any food, some of these options are healthier for our little critters than others, as they vary in protein and fat contents and other nutritional contents. For example, something like mealworms or waxworms, the other worms that I listed, are going to be high in protein, but also very high in fat content, which is okay for occasional feedings of our critters. If we run out of other options or if we're worried about their growth or their weight, but they aren't necessarily beneficial for consistent feedings. Something that is a more consistent option and what we actually use here on campus are pinhead crickets and dubia cockroaches. These have good protein content and are much lower in fat than worms, so they're a great option for regular feedings for each of our critters. Really, the only nutrient that they don't necessarily provide for our critters is calcium, which is a really important nutrient for reptiles, and calcium deficiency is actually one of the most common occurring nutritional disorders in reptiles. So to combat this, there are two supplements that we add along with the insects into our critters' diets. The first of these is a gut loading diet for our insects, and I'll talk a little bit more about what exactly we feed our feeding colonies of insects, but part of their diet is a gut loading supplement that is full of calcium. It says high calcium, lots of calcium and other nutrients. And the goal of this is to have them full of these nutrients before we're feeding them to our critters so that the critters can get the full nutritional value from their live food. The second supplement we add when feeding the live insects is that we'll dust them in a calcium powder. This is called mineral. And we dust them in this powder. It has high calcium and other nutrients. And again, this just increases the nutritional value of each, there was Jules, of each meal for our critters. None of our reptiles on campus currently eat every day. Most of them are twice a week, some of them just once a week. So when they do eat, it's very important that they are getting the highest nutritional value from their meals. Both crickets and dubia cockroaches are pretty much equally as beneficial for our critters, so determining which of the live insects is fed to a critter is pretty much dependent on the way that individual critter prefers to be fed. Some of our critters are pretty picky, and it can take a little bit of getting to know them before we're able to get them to eat for you. Critters who are okay with eating straight from tongs, we tend to give dubia cockroaches. Our dubia cockroaches are always breeding and growing really nicely, so we'll always have dubia of whatever size we want, and we can pick out the perfect size for the critter that's being fed, and then we can feed it to them directly from these. And then critters who don't like to eat directly from tongs, we will give crickets, because dubia cockroaches will tend to burrow underneath substrate in an enclosure and just hide there before the critters will have the opportunity to hunt them. So if possible, we will try to vary up the critters' diets by switching between dubia and crickets when they'll accept the other. But like I said, some of them can be really picky and they don't want to take the other, or they won't eat from the tongs. So we try to switch up their diets when we can, but dubia and crickets are a great option for our critters. So now that we've discussed what we feed them for live feedings, we run into the issue of how are we going to supply all of these insects for our critters. It's actually pretty expensive to purchase dubia and crickets for all of our critters, and the most sustainable option for us is to have our own breeding colonies available. Creating breeding colonies is a really interesting challenge, and I was able to really tackle that this year for our crickets, and also watching over our breeding colony of dubia, which are doing pretty well right now. So first, with the dubia cockroaches, as you have probably heard about cockroaches, they're pretty much indestructible. Our dubia colonies have been really strongly reproducing for a couple of years now. I have their enclosures behind me right here. Oh my gosh, they're so wonderful. And within each of those tanks, we have some egg cartons, empty egg cartons, to increase their surface area in there and give them places to crawl around. A little container filled with the dry gut loader food that I mentioned earlier. And then every day we give them a selection of fresh produce. This is to keep the cockroaches healthy so they can continue to reproduce, and then also to keep them healthy and full of good nutrients, because what they eat is going directly into our critters as well. So for their fresh food dubia, for the fresh food for the dubia, we give them sweet potatoes, apples, cucumbers, or squash, produce like that. I personally try not to give them anything too mushy because it's really gross to pick out of their enclosure, but they really like whatever produce we put in there. They'll eat it. Their tank sits on a heating pad, and they have some heat lamps to keep their temperature around 90 to 95 degrees Fahrenheit, which is ideal for them and for their breeding. Dubia begin mating pretty much immediately after reaching adulthood, and then the females have a gestation period of 65 days and give birth to an average of 25 nymphs. Our colonies have been going for so long that we never have a time without nymphs or adults, and we always have a great range of sizes to pick from, depending on the size of critter that we're feeding. So I just have a little picture here to share. And this is a female dubia laying her egg sac that the nymphs will then come out of, and we'll have lots of little babies. And then you can also see their enclosure there, the little container with their dry gut loader food, and then the egg cartons for places to crawl around. And yeah, she is mid-birth. I caught her mid-birth. So that's kind of fun. Yes, so now moving on from our wonderful dubia to our beloved cricket colony. Through my time as the coolest cobber cricket captain, which is a name I came up with myself, I have made many attempts at getting crickets to mate, and I have lost a lot of crickets in the process. Cricket breeding is very much worth the struggle for us because it's such a great food source for our critters, and having our own colony saves us so much time and money versus buying them from the store all the time. But crickets are just a little bit more finicky than our dubia, so we have been able to successfully breed them, but it has definitely been difficult, and we have had our ups and downs with crickets. Unique to crickets from dubia is that the female crickets need to lay the eggs in a substrate where they will incubate for up to 2 weeks before hatching and producing little baby crickets. They're so cute and little. They're actually really, really small and very cute. I love them. So for our cricket enclosures, we use vermiculite as the bedding, which is a really lightweight substrate that the crickets can crawl around in easily. And it's supposed to help with any smells, but I don't know about that, but it's supposed to help with smells. And then, so we have vermiculite bedding, and then inside of the enclosure, we also have a nice little container that is filled with topsoil for the females to lay their eggs in. And I have a video showing this for you all. I will pull it up. So you can see these female crickets sticking their ovipositors into the topsoil and just pumping their eggs in there. And the eggs will stay in that soil, and we will mist that soil and keep it a nice, moist, warm environment for the eggs to incubate while waiting for them to hatch. And then any chirping you hear in the background is actually the males waiting to breed. And when I played that video, the chirping made the males chirp in here, actually, which is very interesting animal behavior. But yeah, so the males are chirping, trying to breed. And this video was taken at night, which is why the light is red. That's the light from the heat lamp. And they were really going crazy. So that's kind of fun. Yes, so that is our cricket enclosure. And after the eggs are laid in that soil, they take about 2 weeks to incubate before they'll hatch. And we keep a heating pad under their tank as well as a heat lamp to keep the temperature around 90 degrees Fahrenheit as well. We have really found success in breeding when the crickets are warm, so this is an important part of their care. Getting the crickets to mate is really difficult and not something that we can always control. So it has definitely been some trial and error finding exactly the right environment for them within our room, and just the temperature and lighting and humidity situation that we have going on in the Science Center building and how that impacts them in their tank, in their life. We actually were really successful in breeding and we got a great cycle going, just like we have for our dubia cockroaches, but there was a really unfortunate problem, and that was the presence of a really common cricket enclosure pest called the dermestid beetle. Dermestid beetles are a very common pest of cricket and other insect enclosures because they actually eat dead things and dead insects. So they will feed on the crickets that die in our enclosure, which happens really often because crickets have a short lifespan. And so again, that's why we really need our own colony going, so we're not always buying crickets. But dermestid beetles are such a common pest that their larvae will actually just show up with the crickets when we order them from a breeder or if we get them from Petco. So when we're starting our colonies, we unfortunately had some hitchhiker dermestids that began to breed just as well as our crickets. They loved the nice, warm, beautiful environment that I set up. And yeah, it got a little out of control. And this was a problem because these beetles, like I said, they eat dead things. So they can be really devastating to museum collections, specifically our insect museum collection. They are known to get into museum collections and completely destroy the entire thing. If you don't know, Concordia also has a natural history museum located in the basement of the Integrated Science Center with a very large, beautiful insect collection. I really encourage you to go look at it. I have been working on that for the past year. So you can imagine my stress when I was trying to take care of the living insects upstairs, and instead of the dead insects downstairs, but then the living insects upstairs became a threat to my other love, which is the dead insects downstairs, and it was just very stressful. So this was a problem that we needed to handle immediately, and in the process of killing the dermestid beetles, we lost a lot of our crickets. So we're currently battling the cold weather, which is getting better now, but we have been battling the cold weather to transport healthy crickets back to campus to return our breeding colony to its greatest potential. We'll get there eventually. It's just difficult. To make a good breeding colony, we need to have good crickets to start, and a lot of those crickets come from, we'll buy them from breeders, but obviously we can't really male crickets when it's cold outside because they'll die, and crickets are just very sensitive. And so yeah, it's definitely been a challenge to get our colony back to where it is, but we have a great system in place and we will get there for sure. As for the diet of our crickets, it's really similar to the dubia. We give them the same dry, gut-loading, cricket high calcium diet, and then we provide them with some fresh produce. For crickets, we pick out more juicy things because they need more water, so they really like cucumber or squash or apple or lettuce, and this is given daily as well. And yeah, that is pretty much it for the care of our insect colonies. Thank you so much for watching this. I hope you've learned so much about bugs and how awesome they are. I hope you have gained an appreciation for the insects that are giving life to the other fun critters on our campus. And they're so wonderful, and I hope you have a great day. Thank you for watching.